the motion that's been brought forward by my honourable colleague from Barrie Innisfil, who serves as the chair on the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics, is important. I'll say that having served on this committee over the past few parliaments, I've had the opportunity to work with the member for Barrie Innisfil and see him bring a serious approach that is necessary when we're dealing with matters that fall under the purview of this committee. And this is a prime example of the important work that this committee can do. And with members of opposition parties carrying a majority of votes on this committee, it presents an opportunity for this standing committee to examine and to challenge and to test the rules and the legislation as it pertains to issues that strike to the heart of what's undermined Canadians' confidence in our democratic institutions over the last few years. And the Conflict of Interest Act, we've seen that this has been a law that hasn't been well respected by the Liberal government over the past 10 years. Members of the current cabinet having been found to have broken that law, former Prime Minister Trudeau having broken that law 5 times, and this is a concern for Canadians. And now we're reviewing this act in the context of a Prime Minister who has 103 potential conflicts that have to be managed. And what does that mean and what does that look like? And how is that process being used to enhance and protect the confidence that Canadians are supposed to be able to have in their executive and in elected officials? Right now, with those conflicts of interest, there's a screen in place. There are screens in place, and that means that there's issues that are not to be raised at the table, at the cabinet table, when the Prime Minister is in the room. It's 103 issues, and based on his work as chair at Brookfield, they touch on things that you would expect that would be important for the Prime Minister to be at the table for: telecommunications, infrastructure, military. And the screen is being administered, this protection, and the protection isn't for the Prime Minister, I would say. It's for Canadians. The intent here should be that we protect Canadians from public office holders, ministers, in this case, the First Minister, the Prime Minister, from being involved in discussions and taking decisions that would improve his finances, that he could financially benefit from. But the people who administer that work for him. So it's the Clerk of the Privy Council and the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister. Now, we had the former Clerk of the Privy Council testify at committee. And the challenge that I would raise today is that with the former Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, when Mr. Wernick was the clerk, well, that's when those 5 occurrences of the Conflict of Interest Act having been broken, those laws being broken by the Prime Minister, took place. So what was the efficacy of this situation or this system? Well, I would say it didn't work. It was very poor. And so is this something that needs to be changed? Well, this is what the committee is considering, of course. The question of whether or not, as the Act defines it, divesting funds is sufficient is also very important. And we had another witness at committee, a former chief of staff to Prime Minister Harper, who suggested, or who agreed with the suggestion that divestiture should mean that it's actually divested, not sold, not placed into a blind trust, but sold. Because with the conflicts that continue to exist with this Prime Minister, that he set up all kinds of funds when he worked at Brookfield, and he's invested in those funds. But the pieces of those funds aren't clear to the public. It's very opaque. Does he continue to hold through that blind trust investments in tax havens?
Right.
We don't know. Should a Prime Minister, by the way, have investments in tax havens? I would say no. They should be paying taxes like everyone else, not using the accounting tricks that the wealthy rely on to avoid paying their fair share. We expect at a minimum that the Prime Minister is going to pay their fair share of taxes. And so we expect that we're going to be able to get some transparency through the reporting process, and right now we don't get that. So should divest mean that they instead sell those controlled assets, not their real estate, not their home, but sell those controlled assets and then have the investing process carried out by a manager who would operate in the blind from direction from the Prime Minister. What we heard from the current ethics commissioner is that when funds go into the blind trust, that there's not a lot of turnover or churn or trading that takes place, and that they come back out the other side often looking in the same form. The composition of the trust is the same. But I think that you would find that if you looked at the performance of the investments that were made by the Prime Minister that he set up immediately before taking office and then placed into the trust to be managed by someone else, well, the only people who are blind to the full composition of the trust are Canadians. The Prime Minister knows what went in, and he knows what's going to come out. And based on the decisions that he takes, only to be stopped, if at all, by his two employees, that their value is going to increase. So these are the things that we need to study. We need to get better visibility on who is managing it and how it's being managed. If I could, Madam Chair, could you give me an indication of my time remaining? For these reasons and others that I can't get into at great length at this moment but would like to see the committee examine, I'm going to move an amendment to the motion, that the motion be amended by deleting all the words after the word that and substituting the following. The third report of the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics, presented on Monday, September 22nd, 2025, be now concurred in, but that it be recommitted to the committee for further consideration with a view to assessing whether the scope of the review of the Conflict of Interest Act proposed by the committee should be amended in order to address better the concerns posed by the unprecedented extent of the Prime Minister's corporate and shareholding interests, provided that, for the purposes of this order of reference, A, the following be ordered to appear as witnesses separately for at least 2 hours each at dates and times to be fixed by the chair of the committee, but no later than Friday, November 21st, 2025. Michael Sabia, Clerk of the Privy Council and Administrator of the Prime Minister's Conflict of Interest Screen. Marc-Andre Blanchard, Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister and Administrator of the Prime Minister's Conflict of Interest Screen. Bruce Flatt, CEO of Brookfield Corporation and the Prime Minister's immediate successor as Chair of the Board of Directors of Brookfield Asset Management. And Connor Teskey, President of Brookfield Asset Management, Inc. and Chief Executive Officer of Brookfield Renewable Partners, LP. And it be an instruction that the committee report back to the House by Friday, November 28th, 2025. Thank you.